Hello, welcome back to the channel. So there are a lot of characters in Star Rail now, and they range pretty wildly in power. Some of them are really good, some of them are pretty bad, but a lot of them I feel just fall into the category of just being just kind of mediocre. Where like they're bad, but I wouldn't really call them like good either. They're just kind of whatever. So I wanted to kind of look at some characters that I would say are kind of in like a bit of a mediocre place and see what can be done to make them better. And obviously, for this, I'm mainly just, talking about purely gameplay, since talking about characters from, like, a design standpoint would be way too subjective. But a character that immediately comes to mind for me for this is Sampo. Sampo, like, isn't terrible. He can be, like, decent, especially with Eidolons. There are just, like, a couple of things in his kit that I think do hold him back. One is just being a 4-star, so his damage is just way lower than a normal character would be. But two, like his wind shear only doing like 52% of his attack is pretty low. I feel like it could be even at least like 100%, so it would actually feel worth it. Also, only being able to stack wind shear up to 5 times is like barely anything. Like if you're fighting a boss, you're gonna get that in like one skill usage. I mean, look at someone like Black Swan, who like fills a very similar role. Like she can stack Arcana up to 50 times. And Arcana is like way better than wind shear most of the time because it is AoE. So I feel like you could either just get rid of the stack limit entirely, or I feel like you can make the stack limit at least like maybe like 20 or something, since wind shear is way easier to stack quickly on one enemy than it is with something like Arcana. Then also, like, the debuff that his ultimate applies sounds good in theory, but I think the main problem with it isn't necessarily the effect itself. It's more so just that, like, most of the dot characters don't apply that many dots, you can't really get that much value out of it. Because this effect is a lot better with, like, a lot of, like, small dots, rather than just applying, like, one, like, big stack at once. That ironically makes the debuff probably the best with Sampo himself, since his skill applies a bunch of wind shear at once, in, like, a bunch of hits. But someone like, like Kafka, I mean, it's not to say that it's, like, bad with those two. I just think that, like, if we get more, like, like, multi-hit, dot characters, it would be a lot better. Also, I feel like the effect would just make more sense if he just said it just doubled all the dot effects on the enemy, instead of it just being, like, 30%. I just feel like that would just make way more sense. His traces, I think, are, like, okay, even if they are, like, just kind of boring. But the last thing I do want to talk about for him is the Eidolons, which, like, some of them are really good, but some of them are also really bad. Like, his E2 feels so pointless because only giving like one wind shear on kill is like nothing. Maybe if it like transferred half of the wind shear stack to another enemy, then I could maybe see it actually being good. Like, I don't think you should do like the whole stack, because I feel like that would just be way too good, and you could just stack like 1,000,000 wind shear on an enemy and just kill them in like 5 seconds. Then like his E4 I do think is good, but I do think 8% is kind of low for how much more damage you need now. So I would say maybe you could boost it up to like maybe like 10 or even like 12%. And maybe that would be a bit too good, so maybe just 10% will be fine. Because the effect is good, I just think that he needs a bit better numbers. Because I think that's the main problem with Sampo, is that it's just because he's a 4-star, so his numbers are just not good. And also, in most dot teams, you would rather just run like another support rather than running like a third dot character, because you already have Kafka and Black Swan. You don't really need Sampo in the team, But moving on from Sampo is someone who I think is probably one of the most like just forgotten characters in the game, which is Bailu. Bailu can be helpful if you don't really have any other healers. It's just kind of like, once you get like anyone else, she kind of just becomes obsolete. The main thing that I do think really does hurt her is the lack of a cleanse, which basically every other healer has. Like, she doesn't even get one in her Eidolons. So I think that, like, at least her ultimate should have a cleanse, so that it works better as, like, a emergency heal option. But I would say maybe her skill could also have it, but maybe only on, like, the first hit or something. But speaking of her skill, another problem with her is her skill being mostly, like, RNG reliant, which makes it way harder to use her than most healers. Since if you need multiple characters healed, you kind of just have to hope that it hits the right characters. I would just make it so that you can target each bounce, so that you actually know what it's going to do. And like, yeah, it might make her a bit less unique, but sometimes the character being more unique just makes them worse. Another thing is that Invigorate isn't as good as you would think it would be, because it doesn't actually prevent you from getting a one-shot. Because it heals you after you take the damage, so if you go to 0, it won't actually heal you, you'll still just die. So I think that if they made it so that even if you go below 0, Invigorate would still heal you back up, I think that would be a lot better for like a specific like niche of just preventing one-shots. And I don't even think it would be like that broken, just because of like how much faster the bosses attack now. So Invigorate would just go away super fast. Her traces, I would say, are actually, I think, pretty good. I would maybe make her like A6, have like maybe 15% damage reduction, just to be in line with a lot of other damage reduction in the game, since 10% does seem a bit low. But they do all at least like help her do what she wants to do, which a lot of other traces don't really do that. Her Eidolons, on the other hand, kind of suck. Like, her E1 is hard to get value out of, since you just aren't really always going to be at full HP. It's like, especially when Invigorate ends, you know, because you're going to be getting hit. So I would just make it so when an ally with Invigoration is hit, they regenerate 8 energy. So it's a lot easier to get value out of, and she would be able to fill a sort of like niche in like energy teams if you don't have like Woho. Her E2 is also kind of weird, because she gets a healing increase after she uses her ultimate, so her ultimate doesn't get the increased healing, which is kind of weird to me. I feel like it should be like when she uses her ultimate, meaning she gets it like while she uses it. I feel like that would make a lot more sense. Her E4 I think actually would be pretty good if she could target her skill, since she could just stack the effect on like the DPS, and the DPS would do a lot more damage. Her E6 I think is like fine, if just like kind of boring, because all it does is just make her be able to revive one more character, which like I feel like most of the time you're not really going to need that, because I feel like if you're dying that much already, you kind of have bigger problems, you know? I think that the main problem with Bailu and just kind of a lot of older sustains in general is that like they just kind of just heal and that's it. They don't really provide any other sort of like value or anything, which isn't really good enough when most of the sustains now we have actually like do something else besides that. Like, you know, Aventurine can apply debuffs, it also is like a follow-up attacker as well. Woho can regen energy and give you attack. Hyacinth is like the pinnacle of this, because she can basically just do everything. I do think that these would at least make Bailu like a decent option if you just don't have many other healers, because right now she just kind of feels like, why would you ever use her over like anyone else, you know? Now for the last character in this video is someone who I do think is kind of underrated, but they are just like unfortunately completely outclassed by another character, which is Hanya. Hanya, I would say, is actually like pretty decent if you have her at like E6, but she is just completely outclassed by Sparkle. Like, Sparkle just does everything she wants to do, but just way better. And her kit just feels kind of janky to use because of how her skill works. Because one, you only get the refund after 2 procs of the effect, which makes it a lot harder to get value out of, especially compared to Sparkle, who can just give you a ton of skill points immediately. And it can only trigger 2 times, which I would maybe get if it only triggered after like 1 hit. So like you just hit the enemy and you get those skill point back. But the fact that it has both and that it is single target means that it's just so slow to actually get the skill points back, or it doesn't really feel worth it, and you would just rather use a much more SP positive support. So what I would do is first make it give skill points back on the first hit, so you don't need to hit the enemy twice, and also have it be like a 3 enemy AoE, kind of like what Firefly's skill is, so it's way easier to proc, and also like you can get way more skill points back with like an AoE, and also would be a lot better with really like skill point heavy characters, like, you know, Danheng, or even like Archer, who's coming up, and it would also make a lot more sense with her A4, which I will talk about in a second. Her ultimate and her talent, I think, are just good as they are, and probably some of the best parts of her kit. Her traces, on the other hand, are a little questionable. Her A2 is like fine, but I would maybe buff the attack to like 20%, but her ult already gives so much attack, so that might just be a bit overkill. Her A4 would be good if her skill was AoE, since with how it works right now, most of the time you're going to put burden on the boss, so you can actually proc it So you're just almost never going to get value out of the A4 because you're basically only getting like one skill point back at that point if you just do it on a single enemy every single time. If it was AoE, you could hit the ads as well as the boss, so you're getting multiple skill points back at the same time. And her A6 could be good, but only giving 2 energy is insane. Like, that is basically nothing. Like, you might as well just not have that at all. Like, I do think it should give, like, at least 5 energy. Like, come on, man. Or even, like, 10, but that might be a bit too good, so I think 5 is fine. For Eidolons, I think they're actually, like, fine, and they actually make sense, since you want her to be, you know, fast, so she can proc her skill a bunch of times. So the Action Advance Forward being on her does actually make sense. You could also maybe do it so that when she uses her ultimate, she Action Advance Forwards herself and the person she targets with her ultimate, but that might be a bit too good, I don't know. Now, would this make her better than Sparkle? Probably not, but I do think this would at least make her a good option for skill point heavy teams. We'll just have to see how good she is right now, especially with Archer coming out, since we haven't gotten a new skill point focused character in so long. And like, at the end of the day, like, these characters don't need to be the best. They just need to feel like they have a place in the game, whether, you know, they're good against a certain boss, whether they have a specific niche in some sort of team, or, you know, just are good in like a specific type of content like Pure Fiction or something. They should have something, but a lot of characters just don't right now. And I do hope that Hoyo do start doing more buffs, because the pace right now is just not enough, especially compared to how many characters we're getting versus how many characters are getting buffed. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below, like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.